Useless? My mom scoffed, laughing as if my decades of service meant nothing. 20 years in uniform and still no house to show for it? My dad added with a smirk. Then, without hesitation, he looked at my sister and said, "She's our future, not you." I stood there in silence, in the very home I once defended in uniform, realizing that the people I thought I was making proud had already written me off years ago. You know that moment when your entire world shifts, when the deepest betrayal is laid bare for everyone to see, right in the middle of a grand celebration? My family had always called me a ghost, invisible, but they were about to learn that ghosts remember everything, especially the foundations built on lies. The sun was barely burning through the morning mist, clinging to Yale's old stone walls, when I slipped into a seat at the very back of the graduation ceremony. Banners flapped in the spring breeze, and the brass band's bright fanfare cut through the low hum of parents, trustees, and deans in their expensive suits. Honestly, I expected to be invisible here. I hadn't told anyone I was coming back from Colorado. Didn't tell them I'd been promoted either. It just didn't matter. Not to them. My younger sister, Sophie, the golden child, the perfect daughter, she was up on stage. Her crimson honor sash was vibrant, her blonde curls bouncing as she laughed, hugging some professor. Her name was practically shouting from every program. Sophie Hale, magna cum laude, the future of global finance. I looked down at my own program, folded in my lap. My name? Nowhere. "Oh, Robert, doesn't she look radiant?" My mother cooed from a few rows ahead, loud enough for everyone around to nod along. "Our Sophie, always destined for greatness." My father gave that tight, familiar nod. "She's everything we hoped for," he said, his voice dropping just low enough to sting. "Unlike others." I just exhaled slowly through my nose. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. I'd spent too long learning how not to flinch. There was a pause. Then my mother turned, just slightly, catching my eye over her shoulder. Her lips curled cold and amused. "You've served for 20 years," she said, almost a taunt. "And still don't even own a proper house. Imagine that." My face stayed still. My smile? It was just a sliver of a breath, invisible to anyone but me. Ghosts don't need houses. Ghosts remember foundations they've had to build with blood. Elaine turned back to the ceremony, that satisfied air about her, like she just delivered a final verdict. The announcer called Sophie's name. She practically floated forward in her sparkling heels, taking the stage like she was born to it. My father stood. He clapped, proudly, his eyes glistening. "She'll be the one supporting us in our old age," he said, beaming. "Claire, your future might just depend on your sister now." And that was the moment something shifted inside me. Suddenly, a low crackle came over the loudspeakers. Then, a deeper vibration pulsed underfoot. And then the roar. That sharp, chopping rhythm of rotor blades tearing through the sky. Heads snapped up. Cameras tilted. Faculty members froze mid-sentence, shielding their eyes. I looked up slowly. Out of the blue, a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter was descending. The wind it kicked up tore through the decorative tents, wrestling with the gowns of everyone in the front row. One woman screamed as her hat flew away. The crowd stumbled backward, a mix of awe and pure confusion. I rose from my chair, with that slow, sure movement of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. My jacket, plain and dark, just fluttered at the hem. I started walking forward, like I belonged to this moment. Because I did. I could feel my mother's gaze, locked on me like a laser. I didn't look back. The helicopter settled right into the center of the quad, blowing grass and confetti everywhere. Its side door flung open. The rotor blades screamed in everyone's ears as a uniformed officer stepped out, scanning the crowd. Then he spotted me. He saluted. Loud. Clear. Unwavering. His voice rang out, somehow audible even over the blades. "General Hale, we need you!" Every conversation froze. My father's jaw just dropped. My sister's bouquet slipped from her fingers, hitting the ground in slow motion. Everyone in that entire school turned to look at me. "General Claire Morgan, the department needs you now." The words weren't even that loud, but they silenced the entire crowd. For a moment, the world just contracted. All sound evaporated, rustling programs, bird song, polite applause. Only the thudding of my own pulse remained. Then, the crowd collectively turned, a silent wave of heads pivoting toward me. And I saw Ree stepping down from the chopper, in full combat dress. Time did something strange then. It slowed, but not like in a movie before an impact. It slowed because something deeper inside me, old and disciplined, slipped into gear. My spine straightened. My eyes locked on his. Lieutenant Colonel Ree Dalton, my second in command during the Phoenix Flame operation, he'd barely aged a day. But the silver in his hair, the hard lines etched around his mouth, those weren't from time. They were from what we'd both seen. What we'd both done. Things no one here would ever understand. He came to a crisp halt, 10 feet in front of me, and saluted. "Ma'am, Colonel," I replied, returning the gesture. We were surrounded by civilians, professors, alumni, a sea of Yale blue robes. Ree might as well have landed on Mars. The absurdity only heightened the reverence. No one laughed. No one moved. The Yale president, a portly man with thick spectacles, hurried across the grass, gown flapping. His brow was damp, his smile twitching nervously as he reached us. "General Morgan," he stammered. Forgive me, I wasn't informed we had the honor of your presence today." I nodded once, my face unreadable. "It wasn't announced." Ree stepped forward, offering the man a thick envelope. "Orders from the Department of Defense. It's customary to present commendations in private, but under the circumstances, they requested a field presentation." The president opened the envelope with trembling fingers. I could see the seal even from here. Defense Meritorious Service Medal. Plus attached clearance tags. His eyebrows shot up. Yes, of course." The murmurs grew louder. I felt them pressing in from every direction. Parents whispering. Students gaping. Camera phones slowly rising. My mother, Elaine, stood now, fingers clenched around her handbag. My father's eyes were narrowed, calculating. Sophie. Sophie looked like someone had just poured ice water down her back. Her smile faltered, but she held it. Barely. Ree turned toward me again. His voice dropped. "They're not just honoring you," he said quietly. "This is a tactical move. Someone's been using your credentials." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He leaned in, and the words hit harder than any gunfire I'd ever faced. "Someone's been authorizing defense funding accounts under your ID. Procurement logs, black budget access. Small enough to slip past oversight. Until it wasn't." A sudden wind swept across the quad, fluttering the edges of Ree's folder. I didn't breathe. "You need to check your assets. Your name's attached to projects you didn't sign." That wasn't possible. Except it was. Because I hadn't reviewed my off-duty records in months. Because I'd assumed everything was locked behind the same firewalls I'd spent a lifetime building. Because I trusted too easily those who should have never had access. The Yale president cleared his throat. "General, would you mind joining us on stage? Just for a brief moment? We'd be honored to." I nodded automatically. Ree stepped aside. As I passed my family, I caught Sophie's wide eyes. She tried to speak, but the words died on her lips. My mother's mouth was a thin line. My father just stared, knuckles white. Reaching the steps, I climbed slowly, deliberately. The sun was too bright. Or maybe it was the fire rising behind my eyes. The crowd was still frozen. No one cheered. No one clapped. They were watching a revelation unravel, and they didn't know what to do with it. On stage, I accepted the medal wordlessly. A firm handshake. A photo I wouldn't see published. A soft murmur from the president about confidentiality. And through it all, the only thing I could hear was Ree's voice. Someone's using your name. As I stepped down, Ree was waiting near the helicopter. He held the door open without a word. I hesitated for half a second. Long enough to scan the stunned faces. The woman who called me a ghost. The man who said I'd depend on my sister. The girl who had taken everything without ever asking what it cost. I turned to Ree. We didn't need words. We never did. I climbed aboard the chopper. The door slammed shut. Claire looked at Ree one last time before stepping into the helicopter, carrying with her the stunned stares of the entire crowd. The world saluted me, but my own family looked away. That sentence repeated itself in my mind like the static before a storm. I had stood on a stage flanked by colonels and defense officials. Yet, when I glanced toward the crowd, the only eyes that refused to meet mine were the ones that had once taught me to walk. Now I was back on military soil. Fort Myer. A place that smelled of gun oil, gravel, and discipline. Here, at least, the world made sense. Orders were orders. Salutes meant something. No one here questioned why I was addressed as General Morgan. Ree led me through a side corridor beneath the admin wing, his tone brisk. I flagged your name through internal security, he said. 2 hours later, I had a ping. Something odd. We entered a plain gray office. No flag. No medals. Just a table and 3 folders stacked with precise symmetry. This, he said, flipping the first one open, was initiated in 2016. A line of credit tied to your Department of Defense ID. It passed the most advanced verification protocols we had at the time. He slid the contract toward me. It bore a near-perfect replica of my signature. I didn't sign this, I said cold. I know, Ree replied. But it went through. And not just once. We found 5 linked financial instruments tied to this name, and all of them were cleared under your digital authorization key. That key was supposed to be air-gapped. Encrypted. I hadn't used it in years. Ree lowered his voice. Here's the part that bothers me. Back in 2016, I delivered a contract to an address in Connecticut for a private military support fund. Nothing alarming at the time, just logistics paperwork. It was addressed to a Mr. Robert Morgan. I stared at him. You delivered something military related to my father? Ree nodded slowly. He said it was on your behalf. Said you were out of the country and needed someone to handle stateside sign-offs. I could almost hear Sophie's voice again, years ago. You're always on the outside. And honestly, you fit there better. I had thought she was just being cruel, but maybe she knew something I didn't. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Ben, the lead from internal security, stepped in, carrying a flash drive. General, we cross-referenced the credit activity against your personnel file and pulled transaction logs. He plugged it into the terminal. On screen, a chart of bank deposits appeared. One stood out immediately. A transfer of $750,000 to a holding account 6 weeks after the contract date. My name was on the deposit slip. But that wasn't the worst part. 3 months later, Ben said, the account was drained entirely. He clicked again, pulling up withdrawal authorization. The name flashed on screen, Robert M., legal guardian. The silence in the room was instant and crushing. My breath caught. He listed himself as my legal proxy? Ben nodded. Yes, ma'am. He filed paperwork using your military file. Stated you were deployed in a classified theater and unable to manage personal assets. I pressed my hands flat against the table. Was there a notarized signature? There was. It matched state records from Connecticut. For a moment, my mind tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe my father had truly believed he was helping. But deep down, I already knew better. Robert Morgan didn't do favors. He did transactions. Ree reached across the table, placing another folder in front of me. This company, he said, was the receiving party of the funds. It's a Delaware shell firm. We started investigating them for tax fraud in 2021. We just never linked it to you until now. The folder showed the company's name, Morch Holdings. Cold fear trickled through me. Morch had been one of the contractors used in our humanitarian logistics mission in northern Africa. They were infamous for billing triple for diesel shipments, and claiming lost cargo that never existed. I had flagged them years ago in an internal memo, and now my name was tied to them financially. My voice came out low. He used me. Reed didn't answer. He didn't have to. Claire cross-referenced the authorization ID again. The screen blinked once. The name was still there. Burned into the chain of custody. Robert M., legal next of kin. My heart clenched like a fist around a bullet. He borrowed my name, then buried it in silence. I sat by the window, watching the soft drizzle streak down the glass, each drop catching reflections of the amber lights on Constitution Avenue. Washington in the spring carried a quiet kind of gloom, one that crept under the skin and settled in the bones. And tonight it mirrored my own unease. The apartment was temporary, arranged through the department, sparse, cold, and too quiet. I hadn't unpacked. My duffel bag sat slumped in the corner like a reluctant guest. 30. That birthday had come and gone without fanfare. I remembered it vividly now, the birthday dinner Sophie insisted on throwing. I waited at the table for hours, sipping a drink I didn't want, staring at the empty seat across from me. Robert had sent a text, caught in a board meeting. "We'll call tomorrow." He never did. Now I understood. The board meeting was likely a transaction, possibly one conducted in my name. The doorbell buzzed. I stood, spine straightening. I'd never met Angela Rees in person, but she came highly recommended by Rees, a civilian attorney who had once taken down a nonprofit CEO for stealing his brother's veteran disability checks. Angela walked in with no umbrella, soaked trench coat dripping at the threshold. "You're taller than I expected," she said, brushing wet curls from her face. "You're drier than I expected," I replied, offering a towel. She smiled faintly, took the towel, and dropped her leather briefcase on the counter. "I've reviewed the documents," she began, pulling out a printed sheet wrapped in plastic. "And I have to be honest with you, this is both worse and better than you think." I leaned over the kitchen island. The paper was a printed PDF, a scanned signature form. "That's my name," I said. "But not my pen." Angela nodded. "Exactly. The signature is too clean. Almost too clean. It lacks natural pressure deviation. This wasn't scanned from a physical document. It was digitally created." I stared at it longer. The curve of the C, too smoothed. The spacing unnaturally uniform. "What does that mean? Legally?" Angela pulled out another folder. This one from a case file dated 2019. "If a signature was fake using software, and it was submitted as binding authorization, it constitutes federal fraud under 18 U.S.C. paragraph 128. But it used my military ID," I said. "Wouldn't that make me partially liable?" "Not if you never consented, and not if we can prove you were deployed at the time." I exhaled slowly. "I was stationed in northern Afghanistan for that entire quarter. No access to U.S. servers." Angela's eyes sharpened. "That's exactly what I need. Do you still have your operational logs, duty rotation reports, deployment orders?" "I have all of it," I replied. She opened her laptop and typed as she spoke. "Then we start building a wall. Timeline. Access records. Signature forensics. Financial trail." A knock interrupted us. Ben stepped in with a flash drive. "Just pulled an old email chain from the Fort Bragg archives," he said. "This one's going to hurt." He handed it to Angela, who opened the attachment. It was an email dated June 2nd, 2016, from Rees' old CO, confirming that Claire Morgan had authorized a credit-based services agreement. Attached was the same signature, this time embedded directly in the document header. Angela zoomed in, squinting. "They embedded a signature into a header? That's stupid and sloppy. That kind of alteration leaves a metadata trail." She clicked twice, revealing the file properties. "Bingo," she said. "This was generated using SignUp Forge Pro, commercial forgery software banned from military contractors. They didn't even scrub the metadata properly. I clenched my fists under the counter. This is enough to go to the feds. Angela didn't answer immediately. She finally looked up from her screen, gaze steady. If I file a report tomorrow, a federal investigation will be opened. But that also means full discovery. Media could catch wind. You'll be dragged through the mud along with your father. I nodded once. So be it. But Angela wasn't done. She lowered her voice. Let me ask you something, and I need the truth. Are you ready to testify in court? To stand on record and publicly accuse your father of felony identity fraud? The room seemed to shrink around me. Outside, rain slicked the windows, washing the city in gray. I didn't answer right away, because part of me wasn't sure whether the ache in my chest was justice burning or grief forming. Angela's tone softened. Are you prepared to go to court against your own father? You can serve a country. You can serve a family. But sometimes you can't serve both. The words came to me as I stood before the metal-framed desk of Colonel Harris, the officer in charge of Special Personnel Administration. His office was sterile, clean, cold, filled with a faint scent of aging leather and discipline. There were no family photos, no plants, just rows of plaques commemorating 30 years of military bureaucracy. He looked at the document I'd handed him, then back at me. You sure? I nodded. Yes, effective immediately. I'm invoking my right to an honorable retirement under Code 6119 post-deployment exemption. He studied my face for signs of doubt. There were none left. The colonel signed at the bottom, then pushed the paper into a locked tray. Well, General Morgan, it's been an honor. If only your family knew who they'd ignored. That last part stung more than I let on. Angela met me just outside the corridor, tablet in hand, trench coat fluttering from a sudden breeze as someone opened the base door behind us. It's done, she asked. I gave her a small nod. She fell into step beside me. This opens a new phase. Once we verify the timeline of deployments and finish tracking the wire paths, I'd recommend a press conference. Controlled, sharp, and timely. I'll coordinate with the department's comms team. No leaks? I asked. She raised an eyebrow. From me? Never. We stopped walking when we reached the glass wall facing the courtyard. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained overcast, a soft iron gray. I could feel the weight of years settling into my joints. I visited his grave yesterday, I said, voice lower than usual. Angela didn't need to ask who. Sergeant Pierce always said silence was our second uniform, but I'm not sure that uniform fits me anymore. We stood in quiet for a moment. Then I turned. Let's do the press conference. And after that, we go to court. Angela's expression didn't change, but her voice was still. Then we fight. Back in my temporary apartment that evening, the air was still thick with the kind of tension only decision brings. I had a stack of deployment logs on my desk next to legal printouts, Ree's encrypted notes, and the military's financial audit archives. I hadn't touched any of them yet. I stared at a photograph tacked to the wall, me and Sergeant Pierce during our last mission in eastern Ghazni. He was smiling in a way I hadn't seen since. I owed him too. I owed myself. The doorbell rang. Cautious, I looked through the peephole. No one. Just a brown envelope, taped carefully to the door. No sender listed. No stamps. Just hand-delivered with precision. I picked it up slowly. The paper was thick, expensive. Inside, a single handwritten letter and an official-looking document, creased once down the middle. I unfolded the letter first. It was unmistakably his handwriting. Claire, I know this isn't enough, but if you can find it in yourself, please forgive me. Dad. I stared at the page, fingers stiff. Underneath, the second document, a copy of a power of attorney agreement dated July 2016. My name printed at the top, his signature at the bottom, but the line where I should have signed was blank. And yet the words scribbled across the top in his sharp cursive cut deeper than any formality ever could. I didn't have a choice. Didn't have a choice. I let the paper fall to the table. So that's what he thought. This was a plea for absolution in exchange for nothing but ink and cowardice. I rose, spine straight as a blade. If he thought forgiveness was automatic, then it was time someone taught him the price of consequence. My father forged my name. Now I would reclaim every letter of it. The conference room inside Rees and Associates smelled faintly of toner and fresh coffee. The windows looked out over the chaotic heart of D.C., but we were sealed in, me, Angela, Ben, and Jordan Lee. It was early June, the kind of humid morning where the air already felt weighed down by secrets. Angela unrolled a stack of printed documents, like she was preparing to dissect a body. We're starting with fiscal year 2016. These are the power of attorney records pulled from military archives and the Central Credit Verification Authority. Ben added, and these, he tapped another folder, are civilian loans and investments registered under your name, but funneled through a company called Meridian Impact LLC. I leaned forward, scanning the forms. My name, my military ID, my social security number, but not my signature. Meridian Impact, I said slowly. Never heard of them. Angela didn't blink. Because they don't advertise. But the address on record links to a suite in an office park in Fairfax, registered under a holding company. And that holding company has a director named... She paused. Let the suspense hang in the air. Robert Morgan. My mouth went dry. Ben added, more than $800,000 funneled through it from 2017 to 2020. Most of it borrowed using your identity as a secured federal asset. I stared at the page like it would offer an explanation, but all it gave me was a headache. Then came Jordan's turn. He was young, early 30s maybe, with sharp glasses and sharper hands. I ran forensic scans on the PDF we gave you, the one with the signature, he said. The metadata was scrubbed, but not completely. He clicked a few keys, and a screen flickered to life. This software here, used to sign the PDF, was a high-end document modifier, not the kind you buy off the shelf. And this, he zoomed into a section of the file, shows a signature layer embedded independently. A digital insert. Angela looked at me. Meaning it wasn't signed. It was engineered. I kept my arms folded, even as my pulse pounded like a drum in my ears. But that's not all, Jordan continued. There's an embedded zip file, hidden inside the original PDF as a steganographic payload. I extracted it. He tapped again. On screen appeared a scan of a driver's license. Mine. Or at least, something that looked like mine. The hair was shorter. The date of birth matched, but the eyes were wrong, the background was off, and the issue authority registered in Georgia. I've never lived in Georgia, I said quietly. No, but someone did, Jordan murmured. And the IP address that uploaded this file, Angela leaned in, was traced to a residential modem registered under Robert Morgan. 48117 West Bale Street, Arlington. The silence after that was thick. Jordan turned to Angela. This goes way beyond identity theft. She didn't respond right away. Her gaze was locked on the screen. When she did speak, her voice was almost too calm. If he forged a military-grade ID, this isn't just fraud. It's a federal felony. Class C minimum, 5 years. I stood slowly, pushing back from the table. My hands trembled. Not from fear, but from fury honed into stillness. My entire life had been a series of silences. Medals earned in deserts no one could spell. Orders followed in shadows. And now I had to go public. Not for glory, but for justice. I want everything, I said. Every document, every file, every name. We build the case. And we don't stop until the last lie burns. Angela nodded once, as if sealing a pact. Ben whispered something I couldn't hear. Maybe it was a prayer or a curse. Jordan turned off the monitor. We'll need a secure server. If he suspects anything, he could start erasing data. Angela then looked at me and asked, as if for confirmation one last time. Claire, are you ready to go all the way with this? I met her eyes. I'm ready to bury the past. But even as I said it, a strange hollowness echoed in my chest. I wasn't sure if I was speaking from strength, or from the aching realization that the only family I'd ever had just crossed a line no blood could clean. Angela then whispered, almost to herself, but loud enough for all of us to hear. If he forged even the ID, this isn't just fraud anymore. It's a federal crime. The world saw him as a philanthropist. I saw him signing my name with poison. The restaurant Elaine chose overlooked the Potomac. All glass walls and silk napkins folded like origami. It was the kind of place where everything sparkled, glassware, conversation. Even the smiles were lacquered with formality. A place for people who never had to clean their own messes. I hadn't seen them all together like this in years. Elaine sat at the head of the table, her posture regal, a flawless pearl necklace wrapped twice around her throat. Robert took the seat beside her, navy blazer pristine, cufflinks glinting with the Morgan family crest. Sophie sparkled too, elegant in ivory silk. Her hair swept up, her lips tinted wine red. Her guests, some young diplomats and advisors from the World Bank, a lobbyist or two, drifted between flattery and champagne. I was a ghost in dress uniform. Quiet, polished, watching. They toasted to Sophie's upcoming post at the World Bank. Her vision for change. Her unwavering sense of duty. I listened, letting the praise wash over her in waves, words I'd once wished to hear for myself. Elaine gestured toward me with an almost charitable smile. Claire decided to join us. We're honored. The table nodded politely. No one asked why I'd been gone, or where I'd been, or why my medals glinted faintly beneath the folds of my formal blazer. I waited until the third course, roasted duck plated like art, before I said casually, Dad, do you still remember a company called Meridian Impact? The knife in Robert's hand paused mid-slice. Just a flicker. But it was enough. He didn't look up. Should I? I smiled faintly. It came up. Old paperwork. Thought it sounded familiar. Elaine set down her wine. Claire, we're celebrating tonight. No shop talk, darling. Sophie tilted her head. Meridian? What is that? Sounds like an NGO. I turned to her. You'll love it. They claim impact, hide liabilities. Very modern. Robert dabbed his mouth with a napkin. Let's not bore our guests. But I saw the tremor in his hand. Subtle. Almost imperceptible. A shiver that traveled from knuckle to stemware. I let silence do its work. Then I reached into my small clutch and pulled out a box. Nothing grand, just a smooth black velvet case, the kind given at military commendations or retirement ceremonies. I slid it across the table to Sophie. She blinked. What's this? A gift? A gift, I said. From one sister to another. She opened it slowly. Inside was a silver bracelet, simple, understated, but engraved along the inside were 11 characters, 13 Bravo 62 Claire. My deployment ID. What does this mean? Sophie asked, brows drawing together. It's a reminder, I replied, sipping water. That names matter. And that even buried things leave traces. She looked puzzled. Robert didn't move. Elaine forced a tight laugh. Claire always had a flair for metaphor. The rest of the dinner limped on. Pauses too long. Glances too sharp. Sophie looked at me differently now. Not with her usual superiority, but with a flicker of confusion, maybe even unease. Dessert was served. Coffee followed. Conversation wandered, but the air never relaxed. As we stood to leave, I walked past Robert's chair, heels clicking like warnings. I stopped beside him. He didn't look up. I bent slightly, just enough for him to hear me clearly over the gentle hum of the restaurant's string quartet. I didn't come here to apologize, I said softly. I came to remind you I'm still alive. Then I turned and walked out, leaving behind the polished crystal, the curated smiles, and the tremble in my father's hand that had nothing to do with age. And for the first time since this all began, I felt the scales start to shift. Just slightly. But unmistakably. Families build legacies, But mine built a fortress of lies. The room we called the war room wasn't much more than a converted storage space inside Angela's firm. Bare walls. One long table. 2 white boards now cluttered with arrows, dates, and initials. But this was where things finally stopped being abstract. This was where we drew battle plans. Angela stood at the center, flanked by Jordan and Ree. A digital projector cast images across the wall, transaction logs, contract scans, calendar entries, my timeline. We've tracked 27 financial entries under your name between 2016 and 2021. Angela said. All of them while you were deployed. Germany, Belgium, Djibouti. Not a single physical presence from you stateside. I nodded. I never authorized a single one. Jordan added. Each contract file was digitally signed. Same metadata pattern, same server origin. Whoever did this got comfortable reusing the tools. Angela circled 2 specific dates on the whiteboard. February 3, 2018. July 12, 2020. Both correspond to injections of capital into Meridian Impact. Both times Claire was abroad. I stepped forward, eyes scanning a folder Jordan laid out. We need a witness, someone from inside. Angela responded before I could finish. Already working on it. Deborah Chan, former accountant at Meridian. She left in 2021. Agreed to meet. The meeting took place in a quiet conference room late that afternoon. Deborah was in her late 40s, soft-spoken but precise. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her old work laptop. I kept copies, she said. Some things never sat right with me, especially the contracts that were signed before they were dated. Angela leaned in. Did you ever see the name Claire Morgan? Deborah nodded several times. The first was a fax sent from Robert Morgan's office directly to our internal server. It had a signature already on it. No initials, no trace routing. It felt off. Did you say anything at the time? I asked. I asked Mr. Morgan once if we should confirm the authorization. He said, it's already been cleared through channels beyond your pay grade. Angela's voice turned razor sharp. Do you still have the transmission record? I do. Jordan pulled the data into our chain of custody. Ree, meanwhile, scrolled through his phone. I found something, he said. An archived email from 2019. It's a subject line from a communications server at Meridian. He read it aloud. Secure using CM clearance. No delays. I froze. Claire Morgan. Angela's eyes narrowed. That's the final link. She returned to the board and started writing. Fax document. Employee confirmation. IP logs. Financial records. Internal emails. That's 5 pillars. Ree looked at me. Still want to stay silent? I didn't answer. I walked to the whiteboard and added one more name under the list of involved parties, Robert Morgan. Angela then stepped back. Her voice was measured, but iron hard. We have enough now. We file a formal complaint with the Office of Inspector General under federal fraud statutes, identity misappropriation, military impersonation, and misapplication of secured clearances. The room went still. Even the projector's hum seemed to hold its breath. I sat slowly, the gravity of what we were about to do settling into my spine like steel. For years I had let silence protect them. For years I had told myself family ties were sacred. But what they'd built wasn't a family. It was a firewall meant to shield deceit. Angela